Welcome to Moments in History channel. Ever heard of a battle where the underdog didn't just win, but completely annihilated an army twice its size? Well, let me take you back to a hot summer day, August 2nd, 216 BCE, in a dusty field in southeastern Italy. This is the story of the Battle of Cannae, a name that still sends shivers down the spine of military history. It's a tale of one man's genius against the mightiest empire of the ancient world. This is the story of Hannibal Barca. The Second Punic War was raging. Carthage and Rome were locked in a death struggle for control of the Mediterranean. For years, Hannibal had been a terrifying phantom in Italy. He'd crossed the Alps with his war elephants, a feat considered impossible, and had already handed the Romans two humiliating defeats at the Trebia River and Lake Trasimene. Rome was bleeding, but it was far from broken. In fact, it was angry. The Roman Senate decided enough was enough. They raised the largest army in their history, a colossal force of over 80,000 men with a single clear objective: find Hannibal and crush him. Leading this massive Roman host were two consuls, Gaius Terentius Varro and Lucius Aemilius Paulus. They had a simple, time-tested plan. The Roman legions were the heavy metal of the ancient world, disciplined, heavily armored infantry that crushed enemies with overwhelming frontal assaults. Their strategy was to use their sheer numbers to punch a hole right through the center of Hannibal's smaller army and obliterate it. It was a solid plan, a Roman plan, but they weren't facing a Roman, they were facing Hannibal. Hannibal's army was a fraction of the size. He had about 40,000 infantry and 10,000 cavalry. Unlike the homogeneous Roman legions, his force was a patchwork of different peoples: veteran Carthaginians, fierce Gauls, skilled Spanish warriors, and his elite Numidian cavalry. On paper, they were outnumbered, out-equipped, and fighting on enemy soil. It looked like a suicide mission. But Hannibal had something more valuable than numbers. He had an intimate understanding of his enemy's mind. He knew the Romans were powerful, but also predictable. He knew their pride and their reliance on brute force, and he planned to turn their greatest strength into their fatal weakness. The battlefield was a wide, open plain near the town of Cannae, perfect for cavalry maneuvers, which played right into Hannibal's hands. As the sun rose on that fateful day, the two armies drew up their lines. The Romans, as expected, packed their infantry into a deep, dense formation, designed to be an unstoppable battering ram. The consuls placed their best legions in the center, confident they would smash through the Carthaginian line. Hannibal did something completely unorthodox. He arranged his infantry in a crescent shape, bulging outwards toward the Romans. In the center of this crescent, he placed his weakest troops, the Gauls and the Spanish. These were his most expendable soldiers. On the flanks, hidden slightly back, he positioned his best soldiers, the veteran African infantry, and on the far wings of the entire army, he placed his superior cavalry, commanded by his brother Mago and the brilliant cavalry officer Hasdrubal. The Roman trumpets blared, and the ground began to shake as nearly 70,000 Roman legionaries surged forward. The massive wave of shields and swords crashed into Hannibal's thin center line. Just as Hannibal predicted, his weaker troops began to give way. The crescent bent backwards, from convex to concave. To the Roman commanders, it looked like a victory. Their plan was working perfectly. The Carthaginian center was collapsing. They urged their men forward, deeper and deeper into the bulge, eager to break through and finish the fight. But this was no collapse. It was a trap, a perfectly executed, deliberate retreat. The Romans, in their eagerness, were being funneled into a killing zone. As they pushed forward, they lost their formation, becoming a disorganized, tightly packed mob. They were so focused on the crumbling center that they didn't notice what was happening on the sides. While the Roman infantry was being drawn into the pocket, Hannibal's cavalry was winning the battle on the wings. His heavy Spanish and Gallic cavalry on the left flank shattered the weaker Roman cavalry opposite them. Instead of chasing them off the field, they performed a brilliant and difficult maneuver. They wheeled around the back of the entire Roman army to attack the remaining Roman cavalry on the other wing from behind. The Roman horsemen were caught in a pincer and destroyed. Now the entire rear of the Roman infantry was exposed, This was the moment Hannibal had been waiting for. With the Roman infantry packed tightly into the trap, unable to even lift their arms to fight, he gave the signal. His elite African infantry, who had been waiting patiently on the flanks, turned inward and smashed into the sides of the Roman legions. At the same time, his victorious cavalry, having dealt with their Roman counterparts, slammed into the rear. The trap was sprung. The mighty Roman army was completely surrounded. What followed was not a battle, it was a slaughter. The Romans, packed so tightly they could barely move, were helpless. The outer ranks were cut down by Hannibal's veterans, and the circle of death grew smaller and smaller. There was no escape. Panic and terror replaced the disciplined confidence of the legions. For 8 horrific hours, the killing continued under the brutal Italian sun. The scale of the carnage was almost unimaginable. By the end of the day, estimates suggest that between 50,000 and 70,000 Roman soldiers lay dead on the field of Cannae. Among the fallen was the consul Lucius Aemilius Paulus, along with 80 senators and countless other officers. It was the single deadliest day in Roman military history. In one afternoon, Hannibal had wiped out an army that had taken the Republic years to build and train. Carthaginian losses, by contrast, were minimal, perhaps around 6,000 men. The news of Cannae sent shockwaves through Rome. The city fell into a state of panic and mourning. The gates were closed, and the streets were filled with the sounds of wailing. They had faced disaster before, but never on this scale. It seemed like the end of the Republic was at hand. Hannibal's top general, Hannibal, famously told him, "You know how to win a victory, Hannibal, but you do not know how to use one." He urged Hannibal to march directly on Rome, which was now virtually defenseless. But Hannibal didn't. Historians have debated this decision for centuries. Perhaps his army was too exhausted. Perhaps he lacked the siege equipment to take the heavily fortified city. Or perhaps he believed that such a devastating loss would force Rome to sue for peace. Whatever the reason, he hesitated. And in that hesitation, Rome found its salvation. Despite the horrific loss, the Roman spirit did not break. They refused to surrender. They drew on their deep reserves of manpower, recruited new legions, even enlisting slaves and criminals, and adopted a new strategy. They would avoid facing Hannibal in open battle at all costs. Instead, they would harass his supply lines and slowly, painstakingly, reclaim the territory he had taken. This became known as the Fabian strategy, a war of attrition that Hannibal, far from home, simply couldn't win. Although Hannibal never conquered the city of Rome, the Battle of Cannae remains his masterpiece. It's the textbook example of a perfect battle, a tactical masterclass in using strategy, discipline, and psychology to overcome impossible odds. The double envelopment maneuver he pioneered is still studied at military academies across the world, from West Point to Sandhurst. Commanders from Napoleon Bonaparte to General Norman Schwarzkopf have drawn inspiration from his genius. The Battle of Cannae is more than just a story of a great military victory. It's a timeless lesson in leadership and innovation. It shows how a deep understanding of your opponent, combined with the courage to do the unexpected, can lead to astonishing results. Hannibal Barca's triumph at Cannae secured his place in history as one of the greatest military commanders who ever lived. And it serves as a powerful reminder that sometimes the biggest army doesn't win the fight. The smartest one does. Thanks for watching. If you found this dive into ancient history fascinating, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Moments in History channel for more stories of epic battles and brilliant strategists. Let us know in the comments which historical battle you'd like us to cover next. See you in the next one.